practitioners of this craft, welcome back to this thing of ours. I'm your host, Neil K. Marcellus, and these are the Chronicles of Gameology, and that's checkmate. A well-developed and a mature mind has no problem dominating the circumstances and the conditions it finds itself in. This is one of the main objectives and application of this street philosophy, referred to as the concept called game. And like I have said on several other occasions of the Chronicles of Gameology, when I refer to this craft as being from the streets, it isn't meant to imply anything grimy or nefarious, but instead to point out that this thing of ours, this street philosophy, it comes from accumulated experience and street knowledge. And street knowledge is being shrewdly aware of how to survive and be successful in any situation as a result of thriving and succeeding in a no-nonsense environment like the streets. But I digress. Nevertheless, being able to do what I just stated, as for a mature mind dominating its circumstances, but this provides one the knack and the proficiency at making proper distinctions, which is the ability to point out what stands apart between two things or two subject matters and how they are exactly dissimilar. This showcases what a sharp and forward-leaning intellect must do in order to maintain its efficiency. Case in point, check out this image I'm now showing. The difference between chess, a more intellectual endeavor, versus checkers, which is a significant less strenuous thought process requiring very little mental dexterity, is a prime example of a crucial distinction. But the distinction and difference that is the point of contention for this episode is the difference between two major terms or phrases commonly thrown around and heard frequently in this street philosophy. But these two phrases and concepts are consistently mixed up and their proper definition distorted and routinely turned upside down. So, the first of these two terms is the phrase that is associated with getting over on someone, which is uttered when referencing that a person is currently being suckered and swindled. And this is the term having game ran on you, and what exactly makes a person vulnerable so this can be done to them in the first place. I will divulge how this is here momentarily. And FYI, running game on someone is the hardware, to use a computer analogy, but the software that runs everything and points back to a greater line of reasoning and school of thought is the dark side of the force as it pertains to this street philosophy. But this dark side of the force, this greater school of thought, is called Shiestyism, which can be implemented either by a man or a woman, as this image is indicating. First and foremost, as this image is showing, anytime the term someone is running game on you, or she or he is running game on so and so is uttered and used, then it is always implied and is referencing to the fact that this is spelled with the lowercase letter g. Now, the second of these two phrases and terms, which points back to the philosophy of this craft and street discipline, this second term, but the phrase which is commonly heard among practitioners is, one should always keep their game tight. However, this is where a major and a key and important difference kicks in. When referencing to the philosophy, the concept called game, it is always implied and suggested to be taken and understood with the uppercase letter G. With this being the case, now let me unpack the nuances and subtleties and not too subtle differences between these two concepts, starting with the philosophy, which is the concept called game. Like I have said on several other episodes of the Chronicles of Gameology, the chessboard of life is saturated with conflict, excessive competition, and illogical occurrences. Between these three factors, this creates a forest of complexities. Complexities in business, politics, intimate, casual relationship, etc., you name it. wherever the human dynamic is being played out, then you would find these three factors sitting back with their heels kicked up, having orchestrated and mastermind everything. So, the philosophy of game is a practitioner who is gamed up that can bring and restore balance and cooperation to all of the chaos and melee consistently transpiring and taking place within the social dynamic. Now, this is where a split and a division takes place. As for the concept of running game on someone or somebody, spelled with the lowercase letter G. This division that I just mentioned is categorized, which will better explain the position and placement that an individual falls into when it comes to this topic of Shiestyism. So an individual, and I will explain why this is here in a moment, but an individual will fall into the categories of number one, a shyster, which is a perpetrator of Shiestyism that sits at the top of the hierarchy as this image is indicating, or the second category, which is a poison pawn, a so-called victim. Now, going back to these three factors on this image that is consistently transpiring on a 24/7 basis, zeroing in on this second factor, which is excessive competition. You see, competition by far is natural and necessary, but when a man is game goofy and haven't been properly laced up about the unwritten playbook that contains the blueprint and instructions on how to go about competing upon this chessboard we call life, then these kind of men would have an adverse reaction to the onslaught that competition is known for bringing. This produces an often nasty internal civil war within a man's makeup and makes him wobble and waver between who one is and who one is not. So if a man's self-notion, his self-concept, his inner core is sitting on a shaky foundation, and by the way, here's a link. I did a whole episode on the importance of one's inner core, one's self-concept. Check it out once you are finished viewing this episode. But if this self-concept is weak, then who one is not will become their domineering identity. At this point, being unable to muster the mental dexterity, which is an essential quality that shows that an individual has game, but without this mental dexterity to contend with excessive competition, then the individual would start to weaponize their thoughts and motives. And this is when individuals will either fall into one of the two categories I mentioned earlier. So one, they will become a shyster and will try to get over on other individuals and run game on them, or fall into the second category and become a poison pawn, a so-called victim. See, here's the thing. The nuances surrounding the concept of Shiestyism, when an individual becomes a shyster, the first category that I mentioned, but when an individual takes upon themselves and assume this position, this can range from an individual being somewhat dishonest to an individual exemplifying full-blown treachery, who is quick to cut your throat, so to speak, and also can brilliantly orchestrate widespread mayhem and chaos. Just to show you the different degrees and shades of gray that encompasses this concept called Shiestyism and this methodology, which is running game on individuals. It's a movie clip I like to show you. In this short movie clip, which the movie I'm referring to is called Hustle and Flow, but this character, played by Anthony Anderson, calls another character who is the lead actor in this scene I'm getting ready to show you, but the lead actor is played by Terrence Howard, but the character played by Anthony Anderson calls out Terrence Howard's on his bullshit and his attempt to subtly run game on him. This movie is draped and shrouded and soaked into game-related topics and concepts, and a hefty dose of Shiestyism as well. This movie do a damn good job on catching the tone and tenor of the topic I'm bringing you up to speed on. So let's check this short movie clip out and we will pick it up on the other side.
I learned while working on my job. There are two types of people. Those that talk the talk and those that walk the walk. People who walk the walk, they sometimes talk the talk, but most of the time they don't talk at all because they walk. Now people who talk the talk, when it comes time for them to walk, you want to know what they do? What's that? They talk people like me in the walking form.
It's a mantra that is shared among seasoned participants who makes it their business and job to consistently run game on other individuals. And this mantra is, only those who would risk going too far can possibly find out how far one can go. And I guess Anthony Anderson's character peeped and recognized it was time to dish out a cease and desist notice to Terrence Howard's, the main character, bullshit. But spoiler alert, later on towards the end of the movie, Anthony Anderson's character comes to the conclusion that he was duped and that Shiestyism was definitely utilized to get the character being played by Terrence Howard to where he needed to be. Now, at this point, you're probably wondering, just like you have seen played out and transpired in real life several times before. But how exactly does it happen that at first someone clearly seeing that the individual that they are fucking with exhibits questionable intentions, but still yet, and as usual, they get caught up within that other person's bullshit just the same. Like I stated at the beginning of this episode, competition is a conundrum and a difficulty for a lot of individuals. So you can liken competition in similarities to attending a trigonometry math class. Many have sat through and listened, but very few truly understood what the hell was going on. Because competition can be a dog-eat-dog endeavor. And this is why it is all mixed up with Shiestyism and running game on individuals. Without a doubt, competition and Shiestyism is a very tough and an unforgiving contact sport. In the early stages of my development in this street philosophy and learning the final points on competition and Shiestyism, the seasoned OG who gave me the ins and the outs of how all of this truly works in his lessons, he compared this street philosophy to like driving a high performance Formula One race car. The driver, he said, must be multi-talented. First, their foot must be on the brake, the clutch, and the throttle at the same time. So to be well equipped in the nitty gritty and trench warfare of competition and Shiestyism, a practitioner must be well versed within these three overreaching and essential skill sets that is taught within the unpublished and unwritten playbook dealing with the life science of competition and Shiestyism. Check out this brand new image I'm currently showing. A practitioner of this street philosophy must be simultaneously efficient at number 1, playing the game, number 2, playing the players, and last but not least, number 3, playing for keeps. And so, once again, using chess as a symbology, as often I do on this channel, the Chronicles of Gameology, to highlight rising above an issue, which in this case, the issue under scrutiny is how individuals, similarly to the character played by Anthony Anderson, can possibly keep their asses from getting into a sling that leads them into being swindled and taken advantage of and misused and abused. But I show how rising above an issue is allegorically embedded into the game of chess, which has application to the street philosophy and life in general. You see, chess, like economics, become a study of how to best handle one's resources, because chess is governed by the law of counterbalance or give and take. So for instance, when you make a move in chess, this tips the balance to your favor or to your disadvantage. So a chess player must consistently make moves that the ratio is in their favor versus those that would be to their detriment. Circling back to this image of the 3 requirements in order to compete successfully and understand the dark side of the force, which is Shiestyism, similar to what I described about the law of counterbalance or give and take about the game of chess. One must use this same mindset to manage their favorable and not so favorable moves and advancements. Likewise, in order for someone to upgrade their capabilities, to better deal with competition, and to insulate themselves from becoming a poison pawn in someone else's shiesty freak show, then a practitioner must be equipped and efficient at weeding their own garden. Check out this brand new image I'm currently showing. This is equivalent of applying the law of counterbalance or give and take that I just explained as it applies to chess. But weeding one's own garden speaks to the reality that the mind resembles and can be associated in conjunction with rich and fertile soil, whereas one's sensations, thoughts, and their feelings becomes fixated and deeply rooted. So whatever takes root in your subconscious mind produces the fruit or the results you are currently dealing with as you watch this episode. So this concept of weeding your own garden, circling back to those 3 overarching skill sets that it takes to compete successfully and understand the dark side of this force, which is Shiestyism, but the concept of weeding your own garden, which is one's ability to utilize the law of counterbalance or give and take. But this falls up under the numerous other chapters that encompasses this second skill set, showcased on this image, which is playing the player. Because in order to deal with other players situated upon the chessboard of activity, then above all, you must make sure your own player's status and standing is secure and legitimate. And this comes down to how well you have broken up and analyzed your own soil, your own mind, which speaks to weeding your own garden. Now, in weeding your own garden, a practitioner needs to be able to recognize the difference between 2 crucial and very important things. And these 2 crucial and very important things that a practitioner needs to recognize adds up to what is a plant versus what is a weed. Simply put, you cannot make good use of your soil if you do not know the difference between weeds and plants. Plants are the ideas and principles that produces all of your fruits and high yielding results. And weeds, they cut off the circulation and strangle all of your high yielding crops that give you all of your plentiful returns. Now, the particular weed that I want to bring to your undivided attention, because there is a multitude of weeds and poisonous vegetation that can strangle and suffocate your potential. But this particular one makes you vulnerable and wide open to be recruited and used as someone else's poison pawn. And this exact weed has a vicious strangulation capacity. And this wild plant is referred to from a street perspective as the double down fallacy. In a nutshell, it's a term that describes a state of mind which is referred to as bewilderment, that acts like a pair of shades obscuring your vision. Remember, I mentioned earlier how individuals who has a adverse reaction to competition would start to weaponize their thoughts and motives and end up becoming either a shyster or a poison pawn. So this bewilderment that obscures one's vision is one of the drop-off points that those who fall into the category of being a poison pawn will eventually end up at. So this double down fallacy is a trap because it leads an individual into making bad decisions and puts them into a perpetual digging themselves into a whole scenario. The reason this takes place is because the chessboard of activity where competition is conducted at has a hierarchical structure, as do everything in existence. But this hierarchical structure, you can conceptualize this as if you were positioned on top of a steep and a very high vantage point, looking and fixating your gaze at an enormous forest. Coming closer, you will be able to make out the individual trees. And if you drill down and move even closer, then you can observe the leaves. Being game goofy or inflicted with this doubling down fallacy obscures one's vision. It's equivalent of seeing only the forest, the broad view, and never the trees or the leaves, which symbolizes vital details and what's actionable. So your perspective, your outlook will create a distortion, a bewilderment, that you are at a certain proximity, a certain give and take. This misjudgment translates into the continuation of you wholeheartedly investing time, money, or effort into something or someone that will not bring about a positive return, therefore solidifying your position as someone else's flunky, their poison pawn. To conclude, one can argue that sometimes the philosophy of game and the dark side of its application, Shiestyism, which outsources its methods and techniques from a large and extensive bag of tricks, but navigating these two can be like dancing or skating on a razor's edge. It's an odd contradiction. These two schools of thoughts can give the impression that seemingly when one of them stops and comes to an end, the other one takes off and begins where the other one calls a halt to his activity and concludes. Only experience and being properly laced up provides a practitioner the ability to differentiate, to look out and see the horizon, for this is the axis on which the truth truly spins. Now, that's checkmate. Thanks for watching. We'll definitely catch you on the next episode.